In January 2026, Prime Minister Mark Carney did the unthinkable. After nearly a decade of diplomatic deep freeze, he completed a historic 4-day state visit to Beijing, signaling a massive geopolitical shift that has Washington in a panic. But this wasn't just a handshake. It was a calculated survival strategy. In this video, we uncover the untold story of the Maple Dragon pivot. We dig into the secret pressures of the Donroe Doctrine and how threats of annexation from the Trump administration forced Canada into a corner. Was this a genius move to escape the dependency trap on the U.S. economy? Or has Canada just traded one master for another? History usually moves slowly, until it happens all at once. Picture this. It's January 2026. The world is watching Washington, but the real story? The real story is happening 6,000 miles away in Beijing, and it involves Canada? Take a look at this. This isn't just a diplomatic meeting. This is a survival strategy. We are looking at the moment the deep freeze finally broke. For nearly a decade, Ottawa and Beijing barely spoke. But suddenly, Prime Minister Mark Carney lands in China for a historic 4-day state visit. Why? Why now? And why, effectively, turn his back on Canada's oldest ally, the United States? To understand the event, we have to look at the why the trap Canada was stuck in. See this eagle looking down on the beaver? That's the reality of 2026. The Trump administration has rolled out something called the Donroe Doctrine, and it's not friendly. We're talking about economic strangulation and genuine threats of annexation. Canada was caught in a dependency trap, totally reliant on a U.S. economy that had turned hostile. So Carney had a choice: get crushed by the eagle or dance with the dragon. He chose to dance. This brings us to the outcome. What did Canada actually get for breaking the ice? They call it value-based realism, but let's call it what it really is: a grand bargain. First, trade. It's a cars for crops deal. Canada is opening its doors to Chinese electric vehicles, something the U.S. hates, in exchange for China saving Canadian farmers who were getting crushed by American tariffs. Second, energy. Canada is pivoting to become an, quote, energy superpower for Asia, finally getting its oil to a market that isn't the United States. And third, security. They're even cooperating on narcotics control, despite the massive trust issues that still exist. Now, you must agree that the visit was merely a diplomatic courtesy. It was a survival strategy. To understand why this 2026 pivot is so shocking, you have to look at the scars of the last decade. Look at this red line. This is the heartbeat of Canada-China relations, and as you can see, it almost flatlined. We started here, back in 2016. Remember the golden era? This was the attempted opening. Optimism was high, trade deals were on the table, and the diplomatic warmth was at an all-time high. But then 2018 happened. The fracture, the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, and the detention of the two Michaels. Look at that drop. The relationship didn't just cool down. It fell off a cliff. For the next few years, we were in the deep freeze. By 2022, Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy officially labeled China as, quote, disruptive. And by August 2024, we hit rock bottom, right here. The trade war. Canada slapped 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs. At this point, most experts said the relationship was dead. Irreparable. But then, look at the end of the chart. In 2025, we get a political shift with the election of Mark Carney. And suddenly, in January 2026, we see this massive vertical spike, the pivot. We went from a trade war to a strategic partnership in less than 18 months. In geopolitics, lines aren't supposed to move that fast. That isn't just a recovery. That is a desperate U-turn. The question is this a natural recovery? Or is this the chart of a country that realized it had no other choice? The real question is, why did Canada stop trusting the United States? Look at this image. This is the psychological state of Ottawa in 2026. You see the United States here. It's not a partner anymore. It's a vice. It's a clamp. We call this the Donroe Doctrine. It's a twist on the old Monroe Doctrine. In this timeline, the Trump administration isn't just asking for better trade deals. They are using, quote, 51st state rhetoric. They are threatening to annex Greenland. They are challenging Canada's sovereignty in the Arctic. So, look at Canada here. We are being squeezed. The pressure is existential. The economy is being bullied. Integration is dead. And the tariffs are unpredictable. So, why is Canada reaching for China? Look at the arm. It's a reach of desperation. The Carney administration didn't calculate that China was better. They calculated that the United States had become an existential risk. Think about that. For the first time in history, Canada decided that the only way to save itself from its best friend was to make a deal with its rival. This wasn't a pivot of opportunity. It was a pivot of survival. Okay, so we know why Canada pivoted. They were scared of the US, but what did they actually sign? What is the deal on paper? This slide tells you everything you need to know. It's called the Grand Bargain, and essentially it's a swap. Cars for crops. On the left, we have what Canada gave up. Remember that 100% tariff on Chinese EVs? The one that matched the US policy? Gone. Canada slashed it down to 6.1%. But Mark Carney isn't crazy. He didn't just open the floodgates. Look at the fine print. There is a quota. Only 49,000 Chinese cars are allowed in per year. And there is a price cap. Half of those cars have to be under $35,000. He is effectively trying to flood the market with cheap cars to help Canadians with the cost of living, while trying not to totally destroy the domestic auto industry. Now, why would he do that? Why let these cars in at all? Because of this, the farm rescue. Canadian farmers were getting crushed. So in exchange for the cars, China dropped the canola tariffs from 84% down to 15%. They also removed all tariffs on lobster and crab. This single deal restored $4 billion to the Canadian economy overnight. So the winners are the farmers and people who want cheap electric cars. The losers? Well, likely the auto unions in Ontario. It's a classic cold-blooded calculation. Sacrifice the factory floor to save the farm. Now let's talk about the real money. For the last 50 years, Canada has had an energy problem. We have massive reserves, but we only had one customer, the United States. When you have only one customer, they set the price. That's why Canada has been selling its oil at a discount for decades. This slide shows how that ends. This is the Asian Energy Corridor. You see this red line? That is the Trans Mountain Pipeline. It used to be controversial. Now, it's a lifeline. Canada is targeting 500,000 barrels of crude oil a day directly to China. The goal is right there in the text, reducing 96% reliance on the US. This is Canada literally unplugging from the American grid. But it's not just oil. Look at the gold arrow. That's LNG, liquid natural gas. They are fast-tracking indigenous-led projects like Sileseams to get gas to Asia fast. And look at Saskatchewan. They are signing massive nuclear cooperation deals to send uranium across the Pacific. But the most explosive part of this slide isn't the map. It's this quote in the corner from Energy Minister Tim Hodgson. China is looking for partners who don't use energy for coercion. That is a direct shot at the White House. He is implying that the US uses its energy policy to bully its allies, while China is just, quote, open for business. This isn't just an energy deal, folks. It's a declaration of independence. So we have the deal. But how does this actually play out? This slide is the roadmap. And as you can see, the road is not smooth. It's actually terrifying. In the short term, right now, in 2026, it looks like a mixed bag. The farmers are happy. They got their relief. But look at the border. Friction. Washington is angry. They are going to start slowing down trucks, checking every single VIN number, testing this new EV arrangement. Crossing the border is about to become a nightmare. But that is just a headache. This is the heart attack. The medium term. The USMCA danger. Remember, the free trade deal with the US is up for review this year. And this slide predicts that the review will be, quote, brutal. The fear is that Donald Trump won't just complain. He will use this China pivot as a pretext, an excuse, to tear up the USMCA entirely. If that happens, the Canadian economy doesn't just stumble, it crashes. But if Carney can survive the storm, if Canada can hold the line, look at the prize at the end. The long-term goal for 2030. The goal is to double non-US exports. But more importantly, it's about identity. Look at the text. Creating a multi-aligned middle power, trading with everyone, controlled by no one. That is the dream. A Canada that doesn't ask for permission. But to get there, we have to walk through a hurricane. The only question left is the prize worth the risk? And so, watch the image that is the perfect summary of the Canada we are living in today. On the left, you have the American iceberg, cold, imposing, shaped like the Capitol, the old ally that became a threat. On the right, you have the Chinese iceberg, the Great Wall, the new partner that demands absolute compliance. And there, in the middle, is Canada. That little ship, Mark Carney's entire strategy, the trade deals, the pipelines, the Greenland alignment. It's all about keeping that ship afloat in this tiny, dangerous channel. The text here says Canada is attempting to be a middle power again. That sounds nice. It means trading with everyone, controlled by no one. But look at the water. It's narrow. One wrong move, one storm, and that ship gets crushed. History will judge this moment on one simple question, written right there at the bottom. Did we just find freedom? Or did the maple leaf simply trade one dependency for another? Or are we building a new world order, just like Carney said? Let us move to a deep and comprehensive analysis of the New World Order. They say that geography is destiny. But what happens when you decide to change the map? Look at this image. For the last 100 years, Canada's map only pointed one way, south. Every pipeline, every highway, every policy pointed directly at the United States. That was the Old World Order. But this is the New World Order. This red and gold line is the Maple Dragon pivot. Notice where it goes? It doesn't go south. It goes east. It goes west. It goes over the top of the world, directly connecting Ottawa to Beijing. And look who is left out. Washington, D.C. sits down here, disconnected. The text on the slide calls it the end of the U.S. dependency trap. That is a polite way of saying that Canada just cut the cord. This video is an analysis of strategic autonomy. It's the story of what happens when a country decides that being a good neighbor is no longer worth the price of survival. So how did we get here? And what does this line actually cost? Let's dive into the briefing. We keep calling this a pivot, but the government prefers a different word, recalibration. This slide explains exactly how we got from point A to point B. It wasn't an accident. It was a chain reaction. It starts here, the driver. For decades, the US and Canada were getting, quote, ever closer. But this slide says that relationship is now obsolete. Why? Because of the numbers. Look at the text. 35% across the board tariffs. When your biggest customer slaps a 35% tax on everything you sell, they aren't your partner anymore. They are your problem. So look at the chain of events. First, the push. The US puts up the wall. Hostility and tariffs. Second, the action. Ottawa realizes it has to move, leading to the Beijing summit in January 2026. And third, the outcome. We see the ships moving. But notice what is on the ship. Cars and wheat. That is the diversified strategic partnership. But the most explosive part of this slide is at the very bottom. This is the why. This is the emotional core of the pivot. The goal is a new world order where Canada is no longer a vassal of the US. That word, vassal, that is a government admitting that for the last 50 years, Canada wasn't a partner. It was a servant. And this deal? This deal is Canada handing in its resignation. If you only remember one image from this video, make it this one. This is the physics of the pivot. It explains why this is happening. It's not a choice. It's a squeeze. On the left, you have the vice, the United States. Under the Donroe Doctrine, the U.S. isn't just protecting its borders. It's engaging in economic warfare. Look at the number here, 35% tariffs. That crushes the Canadian economy instantly. But it gets worse. Look at the text, the nuclear option. The Trump administration is actually using rhetoric about the, quote, 51st state. That is a direct threat to Canada's existence as a country. So, Canada is being crushed. Where does it go? It goes to the magnet, the Chinese market. Now critics will ask, why China? Why not Europe? Why not India? The answer is right here in the text. China offers the only export market large enough. When the US stops buying your oil and your wheat, there is only one other customer on Earth big enough to pick up the slack. The result? Read this quote from Mark Carney at the bottom. It is chilling. The decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship is over. He didn't say it's paused. He didn't say it's strained. He said it is over. Canada has officially realized that its best friend has become its biggest threat. To understand where we are going, we have to remember where we've been. This chart tracks the temperature of Canada-China relations over the last 10 years, and it looks like a roller coaster. We reviewed this one before. We need check it here again. Back in 2015, we were here. The golden era attempt. Optimism was high. But then, December 2018, the crash. The arrest of Meng Wanzhou and the two Michaels. That red bar represents the moment the relationship effectively died. For the next 5 years, we were in the containment era. The line is flat, cold, negative. But look at the end of the chart. Look at this spike. In October 2025, at the Apex Summit, Mark Carney meets President Xi. That is the turnaround. And by January 2026, we are back at historic highs with the strategic partnership deal. Now, how does a country go from containment to partnership so fast? This box gives us the answer. It says the pivot was enabled by two things happening at the exact same time. 1. The collapse of relations with the United States. And 2. The election of a technocratic PM, someone who cares more about the math than the politics, and who was finally willing to defy Washington. It turns out, the freezing cold of the last decade wasn't permanent. It was just waiting for the right moment to thaw. We call this the grand bargain. But let's be honest, it's a rescue mission. This slide shows the exact math behind the deal. On one side, Canada gave China what it wanted, access for its electric cars. But look at the constraints. Canada didn't just open the floodgates. They set a quota, only 49,000 cars a year. And they set a price cap, $35,000. Basically, Canada said, you can sell cars here, but only the cheap ones, and only a limited amount. And in exchange, Canada saved the farm. Literally. Tariffs on canola dropped from 84% to 15%. We got our lobster and seafood back into Beijing restaurants. That is a $4 billion win for Canadian farmers who are on the brink of bankruptcy. But, read the fine print at the bottom. The trade war isn't over. There is still remaining friction. Pork tariffs are still at 25%. Canola oil is still at 100%. So while the ice is breaking, it hasn't fully melted yet. Geopolitics is often just sales, and Mark Carney is making the sales pitch of the century here. Look at the headline. He isn't just selling oil, he is selling security. He's telling Beijing, Russia is at war, the Middle East is on fire, buy from Canada. We are boring, we are stable, but to make that sale, he first had to admit a hard truth. Look at this red X. This is the declining U.S. market access. For 50 years, Canada built its entire economy on sending oil south. But the U.S. is the world's biggest oil producer. They don't need Canadian oil like they used to. That pipe is drying up, so the flow has to reverse. These gold arrows represent the new ambition. We are talking about LNG from Kitimat and oil from Vancouver heading straight to Shanghai. And the numbers are staggering. The target is 50 million tons of energy exports by 2030. Now, look at the sidebar. This isn't just a handshake deal. They are setting up an annual ministerial dialogue. That means every year, the energy ministers from Ottawa and Beijing sit down to plan. And the strategic rationale at the bottom sums it up perfectly. Diversification from U.S. monopoly buying. Canada is effectively saying, we are done letting Washington set the price of the oil. It's time to let the market decide. Now, critics are calling this a sellout. They say we are just flooding the market with cheap Chinese imports. But Mark Carney says, look closer. This slide reveals the actual industrial strategy. It's not a purchase order. It's a trap. It starts with a trade-off. We take their imported tech, the battery, the software, but we enforce a $35,000 price mandate. That solves the immediate problem. Canadians need cheap cars today. We combine that with Canadian resources. We have the lithium and cobalt that China is desperate for. But here is the catch. We aren't just sending rocks to Beijing. The deal forces domestic manufacturing. Look at the text, Chinese joint venture investment. And there is a ticking clock, a 3-year timeline. Basically, Canada told BYD and NIO, you can sell your cars here today, but if you want to stay, you have to build your factories here tomorrow. The goal is this, affordable sovereignty. It sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? Usually, sovereign means expensive. But the logic here, written right at the bottom, is to use the quota to solve the cost of living crisis while forcing China to pay for our new supply chain. So we use their tech, we use their money, but we keep the jobs on Canadian soil. It's a bold bet, but if it works, Canada gets an auto industry upgrade for free. In politics, there is a concept called the third rail. You touch it, and you die. Usually that means things like cutting pensions. But in this relationship, the third rail is drugs, spies, and money. This slide shows how Mark Carney plans to handle the voltage. First, the shield. The fentanyl crisis has been a nightmare for Canada, and everyone knows where the chemical precursors come from. So Carney signed a pact. The RCMP is now working directly with China's Ministry of Public Security. The goal is to stop the money laundering and the drugs. But critics are screaming. They say this invites Chinese police influence right into Ottawa. It's a massive gamble. Trade, national security for public safety. Next, the bridge. This is the sweetener. If you want people to accept a pivot to China, you have to make them like China again. So visa-free travel. It sounds simple, but it's strategic. They want Canadians flying to Beijing, doing business, and posting on social media. It's about normalizing the shift. But this is the one that really angers Washington. Look at the text under the bank. Bypassing US dollar dependence, Canada renewed its currency swap arrangement. That means Canadian companies can buy Chinese goods using Canadian dollars, and vice versa. They don't need to buy US dollars to make the trade happen. This is financial decoupling. Canada is effectively helping China break the dominance of the US dollar. So we aren't just trading goods anymore. We are trading intelligence, people, and currency. That isn't just a pivot. That is a divorce from the American system. Every major policy has a political cost, and this slide shows us exactly who is paying the bill. Mark Carney knows that you can't please everyone, so he has decided to swap his voters. Look at the winner's box. Who is in here? Western farmers and the energy sector. For a Liberal Prime Minister, this is unheard of. He is effectively pivoting away from his traditional base in the cities and delivering a massive win to Western Canada. He is telling Alberta and Saskatchewan, I got your oil and your wheat to market. I solved your problem. And look at the third group, budget consumers. He is betting that regular people don't care about geopolitics. They care that they can finally afford a car again. But look at the price. The losers. Legacy auto manufacturers. That means Ontario. That means the factory towns that have decided Canadian elections for 100 years. Carney is throwing them under the bus to save the West. And of course, the human rights groups. They have been totally sidelined in favor of realism. This box sums up the gamble perfectly. Carney bets on Western alienation relief over traditional Ontario manufacturing interests. He is trying to heal the divide between East and West by making them rich. It's a dangerous game. If he loses Ontario and doesn't win the West, he has no coalition left. This isn't just an economic pivot. It is a total realignment of Canadian politics. Finally, we have to look at the fallout. This isn't just a Canadian story anymore. This is a G7 crisis. The title says it all. The North American fortress is breached. For 80 years, the US and Canada were a fortress. One economy, one security perimeter. Mark Carney just blew a hole in the wall. Look at the text under Washington. They call this a betrayal of containment. The fear in the White House right now is the back door. They are terrified that Canada is going to become a smuggling route for Chinese goods to bypass American tariffs. Now look at Brussels. The G7, NATO. They aren't celebrating Canada's independence. They are worried. The slide calls Canada the weak link in the Western alliance. If you are sitting in a NATO meeting, can you trust the Canadian delegate when you know they just signed a security pact with Beijing? And finally, look at Beijing. They are popping the champagne. The text here is brutal but accurate. Strategic wedge driven into the Western alliance. China's goal for decades has been to split the US from its allies. And with this deal, they finally did it. Canada wanted to be a middle power. But to the rest of the world, we just became a problem. Rhetoric is nice, but in the end, a trade deal is just a list of numbers. This slide is the deal sheet. If you want to know exactly what is going to change in your life on March 1st, this is it. First, look at the cars. The headline is the tariff drop. 100% down to 6.1%. That is the door opening, but the government put two locks on that door. First, a hard cap. 49,000 vehicles. That's it. And second, the price mandate. This is fascinating. They are requiring that half of these cars be under $35,000 Canadian. Ottawa is effectively saying, we don't want Chinese luxury cars. We want cheap commuters for the working class. Now, look at what we got in return. Farmers, you see that 84% to 15% drop on canola? That saves the harvest. And for the energy sector in the West, look at that target. 50 million tons of LNG. That is a massive amount of gas leaving Kitimat. Mark your calendars. March 1st, 2026. That is implementation day. That is when the ships start moving. But look at the warning at the bottom. It's not a total victory. Unresolved issues. If you are a pork producer, you're still facing a 25% tariff. If you refine canola oil, you're still at 100%. So while the door is open, for some Canadians, it's still slammed shut. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive. We've seen the strategy, the risks, and the numbers. And finally, we zoom out. Because this story isn't just about Canada. It's about the future of the entire world. This slide calls Canada the test case. Every other middle power, Australia, the UK, South Korea, is watching this experiment. They want to know, can you actually survive by saying no to the Americans? Look at this visual. We are building a bridge while the rest of the world is building walls. But notice that the bridge isn't finished. There are still cranes. It's fragile. The text calls this transactional diversification. That is the key phrase. For 80 years, Canada had a special relationship with the US. It was emotional. It was family. Mark Carney has replaced family with business. He is betting that in 2026, it is safer to have a contract than a friend. And if you think this is hyperbole, look at the quote from the Prime Minister himself, right there in Beijing. He didn't call it a trade deal. He said it sets Canada and China up for a new world order. Canada has placed its bet. The chips are on the table. Now we just have to see if the gamble pays off, or if the house takes it all. Thanks for watching this deep dive into the Maple Dragon pivot. So that is the board. The pieces have moved. We've gone from the deep freeze to the grand bargain. We've seen the numbers, the risks, and the massive gamble Mark Carney has taken with Canada's future. But now, I need to know where you stand. I read every comment, and I want to see a debate down there today. The question of the day is this. In 10 years, will we look back on the Maple Dragon pivot as the moment Canada finally became a sovereign nation, or the moment we walked into a trap? Type genius or trap in the comments and tell me why. If you enjoyed this deep dive, do me a favor, smash that like button. It really helps the algorithm show this video to more people who need to understand what's happening. And if you want to stay ahead of the New World Order, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We are already working on part 2, the American response, and trust me, you do not want to miss what Washington is planning next. Remember, history doesn't wait for anyone. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.